Hi, and welcome to another episode of Penguins 24/7. We are coming to you from PPG Paints Arena. I'm Taylor Haase. This is Danny Shirey. We are coming to you after the Penguins' 5-2 loss to the Devils at PPG Paints Arena. We're going to be breaking that down. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you can leave comments in the replies. We'll see them. We can put them on the screen. We can answer them live. If you're watching on Twitter, if you reply, we won't see it. You'll have to go to Facebook or YouTube to comment to get involved. But Danny, just where do we even start with this one?
I mean, it feels like every time this team loses a game at this point of the season and where they're at in the standings, it's like, okay, like that's the low point of the season, right? Like that's got to be. And then it feels like they keep finding new ways to get to that low point. Tonight, it's kind of the same story as last night. They came out pretty well. I thought they played okay through the first stages of the game, but whether it be inconsistencies, mental errors, things just kind of falling apart all at the wrong time, all of a sudden they find themselves chasing the game, and then it just gets to a certain point where you're demoralized and you basically know that you have no chance of getting back into it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of things to break down of what went wrong. I mean, power play, Dougie Hamilton gets a power play goal. They allow a shorthanded goal. Let's start with that because that was just awful play.
Well, the shorthanded goal, like I think that's kind of it captures the season almost, right? Like this team has relied so much on its stars and guys like Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. But if you look at that shorthanded goal that the Devils scored, it started kind of with an errant pass that Crosby made from the offensive corner. He just kind of threw it back up to the point without really looking, kind of handcuffed Chris Letang. He had pressure on him, and then all of a sudden the Devils are going down the ice 2-on-1 and score. So Crosby, he's going to screw up too, especially at this stage of his career, as great as he's playing. But the fact that he literally cannot screw up because the rest of his team is giving him so little help is a massive problem.
Yeah. Mark Pedro on Facebook says they just can't play a full game anymore. That seems to be the case. I mean, you look at last night, Long Island, I was there. They dominated most of the game, but it was just, their lapses at most inopportune times handed the game to the Islanders. We have to talk about the third line. They've looked bad all season. So Jeff Carter, he talked today after the game for I want to say it was only the second game since December. I know he talked in LA. The last time I can recall him making himself available to talk after a game was after the December 27th game on Long Island, that awful, 5-1 loss, I think it was. But he said, that the third line has been hit or miss lately. I don't know what hits there have been for the third line. It's been kind of all misses, and this might have been one of the biggest misses. And they didn't make an adjustment coming into this game. They took Brock McGinn off the left wing, put him down on the fourth line, moved Drew O'Connor up. Drew O'Connor's been having a couple of good games since he's gotten back in the lineup. It didn't make a difference.
No, I mean, I think that's all the evidence that you really need, right? Like O'Connor has looked like one of the Penguins' best players in the bottom six since he got into the lineup against the Sharks. And then all of a sudden, his first game on that, getting bumped up, his line is getting out attempted by double digits. They're barely even did they finish with a shot on goal all night, that line?
I don't think they did. I mean, if you look at I'm going to write about the third line in my story, so I'll have like the final numbers, but when we looked after the second period, they were on the ice for one shot attempt the entire game. It was like a Kasperi Kapanen attempt that really didn't go anywhere. Their second one came, it wasn't even any of the forwards on the line. It was a Chad Ruido muffin of a shot that missed the net. So they're allowing an absurd amount of shot attempts, high danger attempts when they're on the ice, and they're not producing anything.
And you asked Mike Sullivan about the third line after the game, which he was none too pleased about. And she straight up asked him, what needs to happen for this line to get going? And he straight up said, "You guys ask me that every day. My answer is the same." Like, okay, well, if you're getting asked about it that frequently, that's probably a problem.
Yeah, I asked, just what his observations have been, like what needs to change. He really didn't say anything about what needs to change, but yeah, he said, they've had games where they've been good and games where they've been bad. My answer is not going to change. It's okay. Well, then we're going to have to keep asking about it because you can't ignore the problem anymore.
Right. I don't think anybody's expecting or wanting him to. Well, I would assume it would make some people feel better if he came out and was like, yeah, that line sucks or whatever. Nobody's asking for that, but we're at least looking for you to acknowledge that it's been nowhere near good enough and that changes need to happen, because right now, like, it's status quo. That Carter's line was out there in high leverage defensive situations as recently as last night, right? So if that's happening, that this problem doesn't seem as glaring to the team and to the coaching staff and management as it does to seemingly everybody else.
Yeah, if again, if you're just joining us, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you can leave comments, questions in the comments. We'll see if we can put them on the screen, answer them. If you're watching on Twitter, if you reply, we're not going to see it. You're going to have to join via Facebook or YouTube. Just search us, DK Pittsburgh Sports. Dakota says, hey guys, love the coverage as always. What does this team do? What are their options? Should they be concerned? For anyone that missed it, we dropped podcasts on Fifth Ave, our Penguins podcast show. Every Saturday now, the first episode of the restart dropped today, where we kind of talked about the options heading into the trade deadline. There's not much. It would be great, I think, if you could get rid of Carter, but that's just not happening.
Well, I mean, that's basically what we specifically talked about was that all the guys that you'd like to move on from, you either can't move or they probably have zero perceived value around the league. Like even a guy like a Brock McGinn, who's going to want to trade for him since he doesn't have a point since Christmas time, right? And anybody else that would maybe net you some value back, guys like Jason Zucker or Jake Gensel, well, if you're detracting them from the roster, there's no way you come out of any deal involving them a better team. Yeah,
if you can see that Brock McGinn, Jeff Carter, Teddy Bluger aren't having great seasons, every other team also sees that. Jeff Carter, again, for people that don't know, no movement clause. He can't be traded, sent down without his consent. Even in the offseason, they can't buy him out.
The one place they can move him is the press box, but they seem like that's never going to happen because I know it's beating the dead horse here. It's Carter. Some of us have been wailing on it for well over a season now, but that's just it. This has been going on for well over a season, and we haven't reached that point. It just feels like there's nothing that can happen now that is going to spark that to change.
Yeah. Penguins, they started Casey Smith yesterday in Long Island. Dustin Tokarski finally got another start in today. Clint says, what the heck is up with Jarry? Something seems very fishy. We're there for Sullivan's pregame availability. Just what's the latest on that?
Well, it was an update that was a non-update, right? So Tristan Jarry has been seeing several doctors and specialists, which is, I guess, a little concerning in and of itself that he's kind of having to bounce around to get all these opinions and whatever it may be. Still practicing with the team. They keep making it sound like he's nearing a return, but every time it looks like he might be set to come back, someone else is in goal.
Yeah, I mean, because when we were in Long Island, Sullivan had his pregame availability too, and he was asked, he said Jarry's not going to be ready to play in Long Island, and someone else that was asked, might he be able to start Saturday against the Devils, and Mike Sullivan sounded like it was up in the air. He said he couldn't answer that. Yeah, they still have to. So yeah, it sounds like he's been close for so long, but nothing yet. Nothing that. Obviously, if anyone's waiting for specifics, they just don't do that. Trade for Gibson. There are a number of teams, I think, that are going to be looking for a goalie in free agency, and most of them have more to offer than the Penguins can, and definitely more cap space, because when the Penguins have no one on long-term IR, they have $18,000 in cap space.
Well, and that's just the thing. I think barring any news that Jarry's going to miss the rest of the season, I would be shocked if this team addresses goaltending. And quite frankly, I don't know how practical it would be anyway if Jarry's going to be healthy. Like, I'm almost at the point where you just have to hope and pray that he is going to be healthy and he's going to be solid Jarry, because otherwise this team is looking like they're not going to have much of a chance at all.
Yeah. Clippy here says, is it a lack of a defensive system from the entire team, or is our defense just not good? Seems like the team defense, playing as a unit, has not been there all season. The answer is this team is not a contender. As it's constructed, the roster. It's not like a matter of like effort. It's like, oh, if they did, this team is not as good as this Devils team, for instance.
Right. I mean, like, is there any question that like the effort on both sides? And granted, I know once the score kind of got out of hand that you saw the Penguins. Come on, they were standing around a little bit. They looked deflated. But early in the game, Jason Zucker's flying into the Devils zone and laying crunching checks on the Devils defenseman, right? Like the effort is there. It's like we talked about, these lapses, and it might even just be for a moment. Like you go back to Pettersson's turnover in New York last night. It's like he's been their steadiest defenseman all season, one of their best defensive defensemen, if not the best. And he had a great game last night too. But the problem is you take this one moment where he literally just made a wrong read and a bad decision, and it turns into this giant snowball effect. And I guess this team is maybe more susceptible to these giant swings because we see them turn it on and do it for half a period, maybe even half a game, and then it looks like a completely different team, the next shift.
Yeah. Peter wants to know why Sullivan keeps playing these old players and won't bring up Wilkes-Barre younger, faster players. So right now they have 0 cap space to do that. And that's even with Ruda on long-term IR. Ruda's long-term, the relief they get from him is what's allowing them to keep Tokarski up, O'Connor up, Friedman, 2 skaters and a goalie. When Ruda comes back, they don't have any cap space. Now, something they can do is waive guys who are regulars, who don't have no movement clauses, again, so not Jeff Carter. And they can, if the guy makes less than $1 million, it all comes off the books. None of it counts against the cap. If they make more than that, just the first 1.1 million comes off. So with someone like Gaten Heinen, you could waive him and all of it is going to come off. Someone like Brock McGinn, you could waive it. The first 1.1 million is going to come off. That would maybe free up a spot for someone like, I don't know, a Nylander or a Puustinen. I don't think that's going to make much of a difference when your third line center is a problem.
Matt here says it's clear this team can't play a full 60-minute game against playoff teams. Any chance you see them becoming sellers at the deadline?
They're not going to become sellers until Crosby is gone.
Correct. And Ron Hextall was asked about this the last time he spoke, and this was even before this, recent stretch that kind of made you really question what direction the Penguins are going to be headed. He was asked about it. He kind of laughed it off and was like, I certainly hope not, like almost like it was a joke question. Here's the thing. The Penguins re-signed Chris Letang, Evgeny Malkin, Brian Rust, Ricard Raquel. They all got term that's going to be well past the point of their expiration dates of the cap hits that they're going to be getting, right? Like, I don't think 5 years down the line you're really going to be thinking that Brian Rust or, Chris Letang are really living up to what they're being paid. But they did that because it gave them what I thought, and I still do, was the best chance to win right now this season and probably next season, right? Mm-hmm. You cannot, less than a season into that, whether your initial call was right or not, you cannot less than a season into that all of a sudden go, okay, we're going to punt on this season, right? Like Crosby is turning in what is going to go down as a historic season for a player the age of 35 or older. There's no guarantee that he's going to be at that level again next season. And even if he's still at a really good level, you see what this team is like with the level he's at right now. What's going to happen when that even takes a little bit of a further step back?
Yeah, definitely not becoming sellers. That's not even a question. I feel like even if, this season continues to slide, it's just not going to happen. Dakota says he's subbing to the podcast. Again, if you missed it, podcast on Fifth Ave. It's back wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search it. We'll be up. Johnny says, did anyone ask Sully if he ever considers making changes to PP1? Gino and Letang make so many mistakes high in the zone, so frustrating. I feel like this is the kind of question that Sullivan just doesn't answer. If you ask him why, will you make changes to this? Or he doesn't really get into personnel decisions like that.
What's up? And the one thing I will say specifically about Malkin and Letang on the power play, like they had a pretty bad blunder. I think it was after the game, they were already down by several goals. But Malkin and Letang were kind of playing with the puck at the point, and it sent the Devils down, racing down on basically a full ice breakaway. Tokarski made a big save. I think in games like this, those issues might be just a little overblown because those guys know they're down and know the rest of the team's not contributing. They're trying to make something happen in those situations because they do have the man advantage. I know it looks awful, when the Devils do go down and end up having a breakaway, whether or not they score. But I don't think that's nearly as big of an issue here as some of the other things that we've discussed throughout this show.
Yeah, we'll take a few more here. I think there's gonna be like a youth hockey game here soon, so it's gonna we're gonna be.
Which explains the early puck drop.
Yeah, we're gonna be kicked out. So I think Dennis, he says most of the guys have no trade clauses and huge contracts, so nobody would or should take. That's something. I mean, we talked about on the podcast that there's guys that you would probably like to move on from and free up cap space, Kasperi Kapanen, but that's going to be an albatross of a contract for anyone with the way he's playing. Someone that we agree that might be a good trade chip is Jan Ruda, just because not that he's been a problem.
He's
but
just a luxury that the Penguins really don't need. I'm not saying he's not better or more impactful than a guy like Chad Ruhwedel or Mark Friedman, although I do think the overall value when you compare their cap hits is just not worth it. Like the Penguins, and I know how everybody's been feeling about Chad Ruhwedel this year. He hasn't been his typical steady self, right?
Yeah.
But they had him on as their number 6D all of last season, and he was fine, right? That the cap hit that he makes, you can get away with that, especially when you can take the money that Ruda is making.
So Ruda, for people that know, $2.75 million. Friedman and Ruda both right around $750. Ruda's not $2 million better than Friedman.
No, and again, when you're still paying Jack Johnson, right? And when you're still on the hook for Jack Johnson, do you really need to be paying a third pairing defenseman as much as Ruda's making? I don't think
so. Byron says we'll have to use O'Connor as trade bait. No, they won't, because O'Connor made just about league minimum. That's not getting you anything. O'Connor, if his cap hit becomes an issue, they can send him down. Moving him out. Even it's just not going to move the needle either way. Even considering he's a young player teams might want. He's not. I think the kind of player that's going to have much value in a trade.
Also, he's the one guy that should probably keep around for this bottom six.
Let's see. Yeah, Pens fan. I'd rather they address the third line than goaltending. We've been talking about that. Yeah, that would be ideal. Another question about that. Riley says, if Jeff Carter were to move off a 3C, who would replace him? I think the ideal candidate is not currently on the team because Drew O'Connor, he can play center. He has played center. Sully's been clear that they really don't think he's ideal as a center at this level. They like him on the wing. Ryan Poehling can play center.
But even him, he's more of a guy you kind of like on that fourth line, because as we've seen with the third line all season, you've basically got guys in spots where they're punching above their weight, and that hasn't been going well. So then you start rolling down. They tried Teddy Bluger in the 3C spot earlier this year. That lasted not very long at all because Bluger's just been having a horrendous season for his standards. So I'm with you. The answer to that is definitely not in-house.
Yeah, Poehling, face-off numbers, it's not everything, but that's something that is keeping Carter in the lineup at this point. It has to be. He's their best center in the faceoff circle. He's close to 60%. Someone like Poehling, he's right around 43%. He hasn't played a ton of center this season, but just not ideal. I think it would have to be someone on the open market, and there's just not a lot out there on the open market. And you saw what someone like Ryan O'Reilly might cost. I think they might be stuck with Carter as a third line center. Dakota, I want to say thank you. Best Pens coverage. We'll take one more. Clippy says, when do you think Sully's time is up? I don't think it is.
I have a feeling the Penguins could lose every single game the rest of this season, and he still wouldn't go anywhere. If anything is to happen at all, it's going to be this front office, Ron Hextall, Brian Burke, that go well before Mike Sullivan.
Yeah, they're the ones that make those decisions, and they've been pretty clear that they have a lot of confidence in Mike Sullivan even through these stretches. Fenway Sports Group also very high on Sullivan. I remember when they took over, John. We had one availability with the chairman, and he said that he repeatedly called Mike Sullivan one of the greatest hockey minds in the game. So I don't know. Obviously, I don't think they'd tell us if they were down on Mike Sullivan, but that they're so consistently over the top in their praise that it comes off as genuine. So I don't think Sullivan's time is going to be up anytime soon. So that's it for this one. Thanks again for joining us for another edition of Penguins 24/7. If you're new here, we do these after every game, definitely every home game, some road games where there's two of us, a lot of practices too. You can get involved in the future. YouTube comments, Facebook comments. We'll take your questions all game. So thanks again for joining us, and we're signing off from PPG Paints Arena.